Yo, what's good? This is Eminem.
This is Rihanna.
Hey, it's Justin Timberlake.
Lady Gaga.
What's up, y'all? I'm Beyonce.
Check it out, y'all.
Compiled from downloads and record sales. These are the 30 biggest songs in Ireland. This is the National Chart on 2FM with Mark McCabe.
And a very good evening to you. Welcome along. This is the National Chart Show here on 2FM for the week ending 12th of March 2015. These are the 30 biggest tunes that you've been buying, downloading and streaming all week long. And we're going to give them to you here between now and just before 10 o'clock. We shall announce what is number one. There is a new entry into the top 30 this week. We shall get to that very shortly indeed. But for now, something that's happening quite frequently in the national chart. It's a double play. The same artist back to back. Kicking off the chart this week at 28 last week, falling 2 places to 30 and opening up this week's chart. Here's Meghan Trainor with All About That Bass. Last week's 11 is at 13, this week Avicii and the Nights, and it's time for the first and only new entry in this week's chart. At number 12, it's me. This is Maniac 2000.
All you guys send me the breath first. Are you ready, yeah? All right.
The National Chart on 2FM with Mark McCabe. Countdown 20 to 11.
So this is what it looks like from 20 down to 11. Last week's 14 down 6 places at 20. George Ezra with Budapest. Up from last week's 40 at 19. This week GDFR Flowrider featuring Sage the Gemini. Last week 37 is up to 18 this week for Hosier and Something New. Down 1 place from last week's 16 at 17 this week. Sia with Chandelier. And at 16, Weekend with Earned It from the 50 Shades of Grey soundtrack. Last week's 12 is down 3 places at 15 this week. Ollie Murs and Demi Lovato with Up. And last week's 21 climbs 7 places and sits at 14 this week for Sam Smith and Lay Me Down. Last week's 11 is down 2 places to 13 for Avicii and the Nights. And the first and only new entry on this week's chart, me, Mark McCabe with Maniac 2000. Last week's 13 climbs 2 places and sits 11 this week, just outside the top 10. And you just heard it there. It was Omi and Cheerleader.
What will be number 1 this week?
So this is what the top 10 looked like for the week ending the 12th of March 2015. Last week's 9 at 10 this week, Echo Smith with Cool Kids. At 8 last week, up to 9 this week for Hosier and Take Me to Church. Last week's 5 at 8 this week for Ed Sheeran and Thinking Out Loud. And gaining 3 places from last week's 10 at 7 this week, Years and Years with King. Last week's 7 at 6 this week for Sia, Elastic Heart. Last week's 6 at 5 this week, Maroon 5 with Sugar. And this is where it starts to go nowhere. Last week 4 goes nowhere, sits at 4 for James Bay and Hold Back the River. This week's 3, last week's 3, Mark Ronson and Bruno Mars with Uptown Funk. And no move at number 2 this week, Rihanna, Kanye West and Paul McCartney with 4 5 seconds. This has been a National Chart Show. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget you can catch the whole thing on the RTE Radio Player. Just go to rte.ie/radio player or download the app for your iOS or your Android device. I'll leave you with this week's number 1. No move from last week. It's Ellie Goulding and Love Me Like You Do.
You have spoken. This is the biggest song in Ireland right now.